You are listening to episode 321 of the Percussion podcast. This is your host, Ksenija Komljenović speaking, and with me is my dear, dear buddy, Ben Charles.
Hey, Ksenija, how are you?
Hey, I am enjoying the first baby steps of the spring break. How are you?
I was like, we're finishing up spring break right now. Are you just starting?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah, I hope you look rejuvenated. You look 3 years younger, if that's possible.
I was ready for, well, I was sort of ready for a break, but we'd had so much time off for snow anyway that it also felt weird.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have a planned break, like none of that guilt tripping and all of that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Good. Well, this episode is going to be released on March 24th, and I'll tell you what is about to happen in music history. The Percussion podcast is finally going to interview the first percussion group who won a Grammy for Best Chamber Music Performance. So that was the shortest, sweetest, best music history of this podcast. You're very welcome. So our guests today are truly historic figures. Literally. And you know what they say, the more famous the guest, the shorter introduction they need. So I'll say no more. We have the Third Coast Percussion today with us. David, Peter, Robert, and Sean, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure to be here.
Of course. Absolutely my pleasure. We'd love to know, I mean, we all know about you, but we'd love to hear your Genesis story. Sort of tell us a little bit about yourselves and how Third Coast came about.
Sure. Maybe I can get started and the other guys can jump in. Third Coast started a little over 17 years ago. We all of the founding members and all the current members studied at Northwestern University. At the time, Mike Burt was teaching there. And like a lot of great percussion programs, Mike focused a lot on percussion ensemble music. And we just fell in love with the music. And is for percussionists, it's such important music, and it was the case back in 2005. But at that time, there were few percussion groups that were trying to make a living doing it. So percussion was kind of just getting started, and of course, there were amazing groups that had been around for decades, like Chromata, or Amadinda Percussion, or NEXUS. But they all there was a bunch of different scenarios, and in the United States, at least, there wasn't really full-time touring percussion groups. And so we just got really excited about the idea and tried to have a go at it. And everyone told us that it was a terrible idea. I think largely because no one else was really doing it, or those few that were trying. It's really a struggle. And it was a long road to get from starting the group to where it became what it is today, a full-time job for the four of us, plus our 3 staff members. But we started small. We just put on shows around Chicago at venues we could get for free, focused on the music, which is what we knew how to do, and then slowly realized that we needed to learn how to run the business of the group too, and sort of learn that in fits and starts, and just gradually, built the thing up.
I had a question. We had Jason Truding from So on a couple of weeks ago, and one thing we asked them was that, you had the established groups like NEXUS, Amadinda, percussion group Cincinnati, and it was like, what did you think you had to offer that would be different or unique from those groups before? And it was funny hearing Jason talk about, like, well, we knew we weren't going to improvise, which So breaks that rule all the time. And he said, there's no point in us doing ragtime xylophone because NEXUS with Bob Becker kind of had that market cornered. So what was different, or what did you hope to fill in the market? What hole did you hope to fill in the market with Third Coast?
The other guys can agree or disagree, but I feel like when we first started, I don't know that we were necessarily answering that question. I think right at the beginning, it was like, we love doing this. We feel like there should be a lot more groups out there doing this. Let's figure out what we can do, And I think over time, we sort of tried to answer that question more and more based on what the music was that we were really excited about playing. And I think for us, it was about being really kind of a repertoire ensemble with a really broad range of projects, different kinds of aesthetics. I think from the beginning, we had music in a repertoire that was composed by members of the group, and we had pieces that were long-standing sort of classics percussion ensemble rep that we just really love playing. And then we were commissioning composers from pretty early on and figuring out how to do that effectively, but also like really interested in a broad range of aesthetics that would factor into that. And I think sort of thinking of it, approaching it really from like kind of a chamber music mentality, I think was sort of how we carved out our identity as we went along. And then I think specific projects along the way really, I think, helped us to zero in on that, sort of defining that identity further.
There was also, there was sort of an element of, well, we were experimenting with a lot of different repertoire, but then a lot of, in the first couple of years, some of like the repertoire choices were actually dictated by just sort of practical and logistical things. I mean, we, the four of us each had like a 5-octave marimba, but nobody owned a tam-tam, that type of thing, so it sort of like steered choices. And then also like in some of our first concerts where, we wanted to play like a really amazing piece by Christopher Deane that calls for 4 marimbas, and it's awesome and it's a beautiful piece. But we realized after the first gig that was not a sustainable thing to be moving 4 5-octave marimbas to every single gig that we did, so those sort of logistical challenges of just being a percussionist ended up sort of informing some of our repertoire choices. And then one of the other things, and I'll let the guys chime in too, if kind of like Rob, if they agree or disagree, but there was, in the very beginning, there was also a push to try to make a show out of the concert. So, and what I mean by that was, even though we were having a lot of different, like very eclectic repertoire choices from a variety of different sort of aesthetics and genres and whatnot, we really wanted to create, an hour-length show that people could come to in the same way they would come to another concert or another theater production. So there would be less of like, let's play a piece and then spend 10 minutes, tearing it down and then setting up another piece, but thinking more like, no, let's think of it as like an actual experience, a performative experience. And, this was really, really early on, but, we were even experimenting with like, staging things and lighting and just trying to make it all flow very seamlessly. And that was definitely a push of ours from the very beginning. And again, because of that, it ended up sort of informing some repertoire choices where we're like, oh, well, what pieces share different instruments, or like, like how does this piece move from one piece to the other, just in terms of like the character and the emotion. Anyway.
Like degree recitals are that like my favorite things. It's just a bunch of pieces that don't go together. So it's nice to hear some sort of artistic thought there. Sorry, Sean, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add on to what Peter was saying. In that way, I think we were looking at groups beyond just percussion ensembles to take our cue from, especially folks who were just about a decade or more in their career beyond us. But groups like Eighth Blackbird here in Chicago, and Alarm Will Sound, or the Kronos Quartet, who had been doing it for decades in the chamber music field. And that drive to create a show or an album, I think early on, before I was even in the group, started attracting me to these guys. They're like, oh, cool, they're doing a show that's all metal. Interesting. And there's no stage setup changes in the middle, like there would normally be in, Ben, as you said, a degree recital.
There was also like some of the venues that we're playing at in the very beginning, like we played at this like black box theater called the Neo-Futurarium. We were playing at some like kind of like indie venues, like club venues in Chicago, like the Empty Bottle and the Hideout, where like these were really small stages too. These were stages that were built for like 4-piece rock bands, and then we show up with like a bunch of marimbas and vibraphones and drums and all this other stuff. And like, it was just like trying to fit all the stuff onto the stage and negotiating with, because we were sharing the bill with other bands too, and just negotiating with them, like the fact that we were just going to like take over, again, like some of that even affected some of our repertoire choices. Cause we realized early on that the type of venues that we wanted to play and the type of audiences that we wanted to reach, we needed to sort of adapt to that. And, we were all students who are used to percussion ensembles, you know, being in a nice big huge concert hall with like access to every single instrument. And anyway, it was a sort of a different experience that we were trying to create.
Peter, backing up a bit, I had one thing today I wanted to ask about, and you already touched on it. I'm actually right now, there's a memorial concert for Christopher Deane happening on April 2nd in Denton, and I'm very honored to be selected to perform Vespertine formations, which I'm assuming is the quartet you're talking about. And we've been using these Third Coast recording as a reference recording. There's two really good recordings. There's the UNT one and the Third Coast one, and then there's a really good video by Vanderbilt. But could you tell us about your experience with that piece? And for anyone unfamiliar, the end of the piece uses these homemade mallets with like a brush attached to a marimba mallet, and it sounds like bird wings flapping. It's really, really cool.
Yeah,
I saw Sean pointing to the album above me.
No. Yeah, I feel like I've been talking a lot, so I'm gonna pitch it to the other guys to talk about this piece. But I did just want to say, since we're talking about Christine, that you know, that was an amazing person, an amazing musician, an amazing mentor, and I know have so many friends, you know, that were students of his and whatnot. And I remember when he passed, just seeing this like outpouring of emotion, and I just wanted to say that, like, you know, for all respect, you know, to him, that like that guy did something right with his life when you saw like that amount of outpouring, you know, of emotion after he passed. So anyway, I'll let some of the other guys talk about Vespertine though.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Echo everything Pete said. And I think, you know, one of Chris's amazing legacies is the music that he wrote. And Vespertine formations, like every piece that Chris wrote, and he didn't write maybe like a ton of pieces, right? There's other composers who write like dozens of pieces every year, and Chris wrote a lot of great music. But it felt like he really, like, each piece was really, really special and created a special sound world. And Vespertine formations is totally like that. So our experience of playing that was, you mentioned those mallets at the end, those sort of custom mallets that, it's been a long time, so I don't remember. I think in the score, it sort of tells you how to construct the mallet or different ways.
There's a little picture, yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, you know, that in the context of what Pete was saying earlier about how we were just like learning how to be a professional group, I remember the unique opportunity and frustrations of that piece, because we were just, you know, we were like, well, where's the professor to tell us how to make these mallets, you know, or where's the authority to say this is how it should be done? Now it's just four people.
And why aren't the page turns done for me?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. Oh man. Like, yeah, I think we like had like epic, like sailboat sized, you know, like music for that piece or something like that. Yeah, it's funny. There were like challenges with that piece, but it's such a great example of a piece that is totally worth it. You know, the payoff is incredible. I will say that we ended up not being able to tour it as much as we wanted to, because it is very much written for 4 marimbas, and that just ended up not being something that we were going to be able to tour. But I kind of wish we had played that piece a lot more. And I'm so glad that we had a chance to record it.
Yeah, you know, you should start using this leverage that you have and just take your Grammy and go lobby for every concert hall to have 4 marimbas on their own, because if everybody can afford a bloody huge piano, they should be able, it's easy. It's even cheaper if you buy 4 marimbas. So.
I won't name names. People could probably piece together, but I have a very dear friend that studied with a famous marimba player, and she's like, oh yeah, when so-and-so plays, the marimba just shows up. It must be nice.
So looking at your careers, you all do so many things and have done so many things in your lives. How did this idea of like, okay, we're going to marry into this quartet and we're going to abandon all these other opportunities happen? Because this is, I mean, I remember hearing that story for the first time. And in fact, it was, I was at Illinois State and I had a friend who went to study and was so excited to study with Sean. And then Sean made the decision of
Tom.
killing
Oh God,
Tom.
it was Tom. Oh man, That was the worst.
I'm
I
so
was
sorry.
like crying, telling these guys I had like met with Tom at PASIC. I was so excited, and there was a ton of other students there. Oh man,
Sorry,
that was
sorry.
a very hard
on this.
decision.
Yeah.
There was I joined the group basically at the cusp when it was shifting from part of a large array of different things that every member of the group was doing to it being a full-time commitment, that the only thing career-wise that each member was doing was Third Coast. And so I'll let those guys kind of explain the process, but it's a fun, like, interesting phone call that I got. It was like, hey, can you come sub for this concert? Great. Can you come play the rest of our season? Hey, can you quit your job? And I was like, is Peter doing that too? Is Rob doing that too? Is David doing it? And yeah, I'll let the other guys kind of explain the steps, but yeah, the only thing that would have gotten me to leave my college teaching position at University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point was to join Third Coast Percussion. That was it. So in that way, it was an easy decision, but the process really sucked.
Happily ever after, it turned out to be.
Yeah.
But yes, please chime in. And you can also share your experiences of what was it that you envisioned your life was gonna be like before, because you did get into the NBA. A lot of you did, so successful at teaching and composing and playing with orchestras, and then you're like, screw all that, I'm staying here.
Yeah, it was definitely a gradual process. I mean, there was a moment when we had to make that decision, but we started the group basically in 2005, and the year when we all went full time was 2013. So it was about an 8-year process. And I would say, at the beginning, we all, from the very beginning, I think we talked about the idea of oh man, this would be really great for this to be our full time jobs, and we had no idea what that would look like, how that could happen, what it would entail, really. But, gradually over the course of, maybe the first 4 years of the group, we figured out how to basically just do anything. And then we also started going from essentially paying money to be in Third Coast Percussion to getting to the point where we were all getting paid a little bit from Third Coast Percussion. And then maybe the next 4 years, roughly, we're going from Third Coast being some amount of money that we each get paid to a larger and larger portion of our livelihoods. And then as we were coming up on the 2013-14 season and had gotten to the point where we were planning out budgets for the next year and making projections about what was going to happen in the future, we were okay, this could be the year where we would make enough to for it to be a full-time job. And also simultaneously, the season or two leading up to that point, touring and the other things we were doing were picking up more and more. It was getting busier and busier, and it was getting harder and harder for us to all say yes to all the things that Third Coast had the opportunities to do, which was awesome, and also keep doing our other jobs at the level that we wanted to and needed to. And so it was kind of this point of okay, well, we can either maybe dial back Third Coast so that we can do it sustainably while keeping our other jobs, or we're going to have to take the plunge and all make that move. And I think each of our situations were slightly different at that point, but for all of us it was this is making a living, making a career out of all of these things in any of the ways of teaching, orchestra playing, freelancing, and composing. All these things is always a huge and difficult thing, I think, to get to, but this felt kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity, and nothing was guaranteed, but if we don't do this now, will we ever have the chance to play in a full-time percussion quartet ever again? And it was something we were just really passionate and excited about doing, and a lot of things were converging at that point. We just were about to start a ensemble residence position at the University of Notre Dame, which was sort of one piece of the puzzle that helped make this possible. Touring was picking up. We had some really exciting commissions and other projects that were moving forward. But there was a lot of communication leading up to that point, I think is sort of a key aspect of it too. So
yeah, the communication I think was an important part of it. I mean, right before we all kind of quit everything else and, did this full time. Not all of us were even living in Chicago. I mean, obviously Sean, was teaching in Wisconsin. I was living in Virginia. I was teaching at Virginia Commonwealth University. Dave, I think, had just recently moved back to Chicago from New York, but he had like a very solid career as a performer and teacher in New York City, and was teaching at Peabody Conservatory as well. So there was this sort of like time where we weren't actually even living in the same city, together, which I guess is not super uncommon for chamber music groups, but always keeping that dialogue open. I remember, so dial it back a little bit. I remember like one of like the really important moments for me in like sort of understanding everybody's level of commitment and goals and desires for this, for our group. I was walking around somewhere in Richmond and I get a phone call from Rob. And this is maybe like a year or so before we became full-time. He's like, hey, I just wanted to talk to you about blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to debate whether I'm going to take this orchestral audition. And I can't remember what the orchestra was, but it was the type of thing where he's like, well, one, it's like, I mean, I don't know if I'm going to get the job, but like, I think I'm like, a good contender for this like position. But like, more importantly, he's like, I don't want to take an audition to take this other job. Because I would love to have Third Coast be like the main job. He's like, but I want to talk to you and make sure that you're cool. You're also cool with the idea of Third Coast being our main job. Because if you're not, then I'm going to go and start taking, I'm going to take this audition, again. And it was just one of those sort of like, not lines in the sand, but it was just one of those moments where it was just like, all right, are we all in? Are we all out? And so that was like really important. And like, there were a variety of conversations after that, about it, but it was definitely, as Rob was saying, there was at a certain point, it got to the point where I couldn't do both jobs. I was a full-time professor living in Richmond, Virginia, and I would get on the plane on Wednesday, get back on Sunday, try to cram all of my teaching onto Monday and Tuesday, then get on the plane on Wednesday and then fly back. It's like that's like unsustainable. And I didn't, and I think it's probably the same with everybody else. It's like, didn't want to dial back Third Coast. And I also didn't want to do a poor job, as a teacher and a mentor of other young, percussionists. So.
Yeah, well, it's amazing that it sounds like it was long distance dating for a while, and then it had to turn into like, okay, this is a 4-way marriage. Is everybody in? And we all got to move. So that's pretty incredible.
It's actually more than the 4-way marriage because, for our partners and families. And I mean, I'll just use an example, Pete, but, Pete was married already to his wife, Jana. And so it wasn't just, hey, I'm just going to quit my tenure track teaching job at an amazing university to go play in a percussion quartet. That is, by the way, not a tenured position.
There's no tenure in percussion quartets.
That's right. But it was also, hey, life partner, will you also quit your job and move across the country? And there was bits of that for all of us. So I just want to highlight that because I think, it's easy to focus on the four of us, but if it wasn't for incredibly supportive networks in our family specifically, this quartet would not exist either. So truth.
Yes, shout out to everybody who made this happen. Really, it's very true, and it's very nice of you to bring that up, because I think a lot of people forget about that. Yes, that's a huge thing, and that's a huge sacrifice on their end to follow us if we want to go somewhere. So it's a huge investment. I want to talk about the date that I saw on Wikipedia, February 12th, 2006. I thought that was very, very important. When you went to the gig that Peter already mentioned at the Neo-Futurarium, right? And as David said at the beginning, you had to learn a lot about business. It seemed like you met a person there who helped you a lot with the ensemble in non-musical ways. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because we don't talk about that stuff enough. And who is Ethelbert Williams? and how have they assisted you?
Yeah.
Sure. Especially Ethelbert. But he gets all
Sorry,
sorts of pronunciations. No worries at all. Ethelbert is, as you say, a longtime friend of the group and of us personally. Ethelbert is someone that I probably met first because we were both in the Northwestern University marching band, not at the same time, but he had graduated a few years before, the four of us in the quartet. But just, a really, really talented percussionist himself, who actually majored in percussion, at least for a short time at Northwestern. So he's just a big fan. And he came to that show at the Neo-Futurarium, which was one of our very first shows. I would say, for me personally, our first, I'll say our most successful show to date. You know what I mean? Like, we had done a couple of other shows where we were really just like, I don't know, let's play these pieces. And then they were like, they nearly killed us because of the instruments that were required, and we forgot to tell people to come to the shows and all kinds of stuff. But this one we advertised, we put it on as a show in the way that Peter was describing. And we felt great about it. And Ethelbert came up to us afterwards and said, "That was awesome. Have you thought about this list of a dozen things?" And we were like, "No, not at all. And please help us." And so he helped put together our first press kit. He helped to market our first CD. He joined our board of directors. He's one of the first members of our board of directors, which is a kind of an idea we can expound upon if that seems like it's of interest. But he has been a member of our team almost as long as anyone, and he's one very prominent example, and there are others as well, of people who, I mentioned our families, but the sort of the other support network that makes Third Coast Percussion possible.
That's incredible. So what was the biggest takeaway? If you could go back, or if you could now take on some baby quartets, and let's say that they are figuring out, their artistic selves, that you cannot microwave into growth, right? It's just going to happen over time, and they're doing the right thing, but they have no clue about press kits or marketing or what to do with an album. Do you have a resource that they could go to? What would you suggest to them? Or just go look up Ethelbert?
Well, it's something that we've spoken about a number of times in a number of different ways when we do either interviews, podcasts like this. A few of those are out there. We actually have on our YouTube channel a series called TCP FAQ, and there's a video or two in there that talk about how we divide up administrative responsibilities in the group, how Third Coast got started. So that's a definite resource to check out. And then the other thing I'd say before, I'll turn over to the other guys that have a lot of different ideas, but I would say do what we did, which is reach out to the people who are doing what you could see yourself wanting to do, and take them out for coffee or lunch or something, and just come really prepared with questions as specific as you want, and ask, and in almost all walks of life. I would say certainly in the percussion community, people are generous, I think with their advice and their time. So it really honestly never hurts to ask.
Yeah, I'll sort of piggyback on that and say, for sure, anyone who's doing something creatively that looks like what you think you want to do in some way, but even people outside of your field who are just knowledgeable about a particular aspect of it. Because I know, Ethelbert's background was in marketing, and he was able to give us, and still gives us such amazing direction and perspective on that. But I remember also sitting down and having meetings with people who did grant writing for various local institutions that were not necessarily music things, or, did marketing or budgeting for other types of organizations. And I think there are a lot of people out there who are way more knowledgeable about that stuff than we are even now, and certainly than we were 15 years ago. It almost never hurts to ask for advice. People are usually, at the very least, flattered that you think they would have advice to offer. So I think that's a great place to start. And the other bit of advice I'll throw on the pile is just like put it on the schedule. If there's something that needs to get done, put it on the schedule rather than thinking about like, oh, it'd be cool to do that sometime. And that could be anything from like creative project that no one else is pushing you to do that you want to do, to like having a time to make a 5-year plan with your chamber group.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, I would kind of just sort of piggyback on what Rob was saying, and I think this also relates to like what Ethelbert, brought to us, is just the idea of just like being really proactive and like setting goals and setting attainable goals for yourself is just really important. And like I mean with Ethelbert, like the goals that he set for us in the very beginning were like, I need you to record an EP album, because like nobody knows what you do unless you have an actual product to show people what it is. He's like, I need you to get press kits, or I need you to get press photos, so you can market yourself. And there's just a handful of these other things that were clearly, I mean, they were marketing, but they're also like you have to do this as like a group. You have to have some type of product to show people what it is that you actually do. This was back in like the mid-aughts where like that was like a CD. Now it's obviously a different thing, but for anybody, nothing just happens. There are very few times in life where something just like appears magically, in your career. It's cool when it does, but if you are betting on that to get you where you want to go in your career, it's probably not going to work out for you. It's certainly not going to work out in like in a good time frame, for you. So, everything that Third Coast does, there's a series of Google Docs behind it. There's always a plan. There's always literally you could take any version, anything that we've done that's been successful. It's due to like a lot of planning, a lot of sort of team strategy, building, and just really proactive work.
I might just add in one more. It's very similar to what everyone's saying, just a different way of thinking of it or reframing it. At the core, so our advice to baby quartet or baby chamber ensemble, at the core of what you do, make sure that artistically it's the best that you can possibly do, and that you love it, and that you're excited to do it. And when you think about doing it, you just want to do it more and more. Because then when you have to do grunt work, you can always rely on the fact that like, this is in service of something that I really believe in. And it almost doesn't really matter what it is, as long as you believe in it and for what it is, it's at a very high quality. Then be able to very quickly and succinctly tell someone about it, and in a way that seems natural to you, that you would be excited about. So, do something really well, and then have an elevator pitch about it. And these days, depending on where in your career, that might be just being able to get your friends excited about what you're doing and what you want to do after college. Or if you're starting something out and you do have an album up on SoundCloud, have something ready to go to tell people about, like, yeah, you got to check out this project if someone asks you. Yeah. But by being able to talk about it in a sincere way that works for whatever your personality is, then you can do what things won't just appear. You help to will them into the universe. So, for example, it was a goal with many Google Docs and with Ethelbert and other board members, strategic planning for Third Coast to become an ensemble in residence. So Dave, who is the executive director and went to a lot of booking conferences and that sort of thing, basically succinctly boiled down what that goal is and just told a lot of people about it. And we were like genuinely excited about it. This is something that we want, and just put it out into the universe. And someone was listening one of the times that he was saying it, and it was not a friend that we already had, but it was through other connections. And If we had just sat around, not put it on a calendar, not made Google Docs, and not externalized it just to ourselves, like, it'd be really cool if we were ensemble in residence. I wonder how that's going to happen. Oh well. We wouldn't have gotten that position. We had to plan for it and be intentional about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then be lucky.
But of course, a little bit of luck never is rejected. Awesome. So let's move on to 2017 and that Grammy performance, where I felt like as I watched it, my palms were sweating and I was just like, what is happening? I can't believe this is happening. And then I thought to myself, oh my God, what is it like to be on stage? And I'd love to hear sort of behind the scenes, because we think, obviously the Grammys are very glamorous in their own right, but also I assume that such a huge production, maybe they did only give you orange M&Ms and the drink that you wanted and infinite sound check time. Maybe they didn't, but what was it like to do that? What was it like to win a Grammy? What that's like, I don't even know. I don't even know how to ask the question. Just tell me, what's it like to be associated with a Grammy?
Well, I'll talk about the performance first, since that's what you started with. We performed at the premiere ceremony in 2017 with Ravi Coltrane, really amazing saxophone player, and there was not infinite sound check time. In fact, how that came about is we were nominated and Ravi was nominated, and the producer of the Grammys, who's the producer at the time, who's this incredible musician who sort of knows a little bit about every single genre of music that you could ever imagine, knew that there was an association between John Coltrane and specifically the harmonic language that he used, and Steve Reich and his music, and that was the album we were nominated for. So he called and said, hey, would you be interested in performing some of Steve Reich's music with Ravi Coltrane soloing over it? And we were all just like, that is not something we've ever thought about. But it was actually, this ties into something we've been talking about, for the past 40 minutes. It was awesome because it made us reframe the context that we have in our minds of what our music is and how it can live and all this sort of stuff. And then we started preparing for that performance. And we knew that we were going to be very nervous. And that's, I think, the most nervous I've been for a performance. Only reference I could draw for how nervous I was for that show was my senior or master's recital, a solo recital where I was like, my degree counts on this or something like that. It's weird that those two would equate in at least in my mind. But that led us to be like, well, the best way to deal with a situation where you're going to be really, really nervous is to rehearse more than you could possibly imagine, and in more ways than you could possibly imagine. So that essentially what you're doing is saying that the worst that this performance could possibly go is still, world class. So we played a piece. We played the last movement of Steve Reich's Mallet Quartet, and we had recorded that piece, obviously. We had probably performed it over 100 times, and we rehearsed it like we had never heard the piece before for a month or more, from the moment we knew we were going to play it until the performance. When we actually got together with Ravi, we ran it one time, and that was it. That was all the time we had. So we played it with him twice now. We played it once during the dress rehearsal, and we played it once on stage with him. Luckily, Ravi's a genius, and so all he needed to know was when it was going to end. So we worked out one cue, this is 4 bars from the end. And I'll just say that it worked because the performance wasn't flawless. I think you can still find it online. And if you watch, there's little flubs and stuff like that, but the energy was there. And it was something we were really, really proud of. And sort of, so we, in spite of the nerves, we did what we wanted to do.
Yeah, I always relate it, and I don't ride motorcycles, but I relate it to the feeling of riding a motorcycle, 100 miles an hour, down a road. That's what that performance felt like, because it was, everything was very, very scripted too, in terms of the Grammy performance, the production of it. It's it's down to the exact like second, you know, and there's like time code that you're seeing from like on the stage to make sure that people aren't talking too long or like whatnot. And we knew exactly what was it Margaret Cho who was the yeah, so we knew, so Margaret Cho was like the MC at that thing, and we knew exactly what her lines were going to be right before we played. And as soon as she said that final line, the lights were going to come up on us and instantly, and we had to go just like immediately, you know. And yeah, so I just remember us like, and you know, we were ushered onto the stage, and the all the tech people were helping us like set up our instruments as she was like talking, you know, for like 3 minutes before we're about to play. And we're like, okay, you know, we're like, okay, and she says that, and it's bam, and you know, and then you just like immediately like you're into like the piece. So it was like this like incredible adrenaline rush. It was awesome. It was super cool. But yeah, nuts. And then we knew that right after that we had to get back into the audience because they were going to announce our category literally like 5 minutes after our concert or our performance. So we get down to that and we're like, oh my God, that was like an amazing, you know, rush of a thing. And then we went out into the audience and like we sat down, and literally like a minute later they announced our category and we won. We're like, oh my gosh. And we get up and then we go up on the stage. So it was yeah, it was just like a very energized sort of moment in time. It was fun for sure.
Yeah, the production aspect of it is like pretty astounding to experience. Because it was very like, you know, there was definitely not infinite sound check time, and there was definitely not any like, we'll take care of you, whatever. But it was like, we knew that it was going to work exactly right. You know, it was like they had gone through and they were like, you know, they gave us all the details. And even though there was not like, we're going to rehearse this a million times till everyone just feels super comfortable, it was like, we know what we're doing. As long as you do this, everything's going to be great. Do it. And we did it, and everything, it just, you know, it all worked. And they're doing that, you know, with like dozens and dozens of artists over the course of that day. And, you know, we had the experience of, you know, playing at, and then getting to see a little bit of the premiere ceremony. And then and in the evening, we get to go see the telecast ceremony. You got really good seats, which is pretty awesome. And one of my favorite aspects of watching that big evening ceremony was seeing the production of that too in real time, because like Beyonce is performing over here, and like there's great, like amazing things going on both artistically and production wise. And then like while it's happening, you know, 50 feet away on the other stage, just kind of on the other end of the room, or, you know, like 50 feet over or something, they're like completely dismantling another set and setting up another set. And you can like sort of tell that it's happening back there. And then at some point, you know, the curtain over there comes up, and I don't know, Katy Perry's over there doing something else completely ridiculous. And it's like all completely getting built and deconstructed in very short amounts of time. It's super cool to see. The whole experience is definitely like, it feels very like removed from normal lives, you know. The whole thing, it felt very surreal, obviously, to get nominated, and then it felt very surreal to be like asked to play, and then to get to play all that stuff. And then you get there and you're like, this is not what my life looks like. We got to like go to this, because we were performing, we got to like go to this special tent where people were showing us prototype beauty products and giving us like new board game concepts, and just being like, what do you think of this? Do you want to take this home? And like gave us just a giant duffel bag to like take home all this stuff that like, you know, I don't know what I'm going to do with that. I have like 2 of the items left from that bag. Everything else has sort of found its way to family and friends over the years, which is pretty fun. But, you know, and it's an awesome and amazing experience, and like something you never forget. And then, you know, the next week you're like back to doing what we do. And we're like at an elementary school full of kids playing marimba and talking about melody. And then we're like going to another city, we're playing a concert, we're going to another city, and we're, you know, all the things are happening. And somehow, you know, I have not been asked to go to another tent where people give me prototype beauty products since then. I don't know what's going on.
I felt bad for the people who were from different countries who, like, you know, showed up, came all the way from Japan with their stuff, and then they end up talking to me, and and they're like, "What do you think about this this robe?" I'm like, "I love it. I think you should market it." they're like, "Oh, great! Here, stand and take your picture with us." I'm like, fine, great. Like, that's not going to help you sell anything, but I'll take my picture with you. That's fine.
It was really fun. And like what I always like, one of my favorite memories of that whole experience too, beyond all this like really kind of like fun, glamorous, glitzy thing, you know, that we were kind of like talking about, was actually, it was the morning. I guess it would have been the morning of the premiere show, where we were in our dressing room, and this is at like 9 a.m, you know, and our dressing room happened to be between the dressing rooms of Metallica and Lady Gaga. So we're in the dressing room. It's like 9 a.m, you know, where our nerves are starting to come up. We're like kind of like warming up. We're like, okay, this is going to happen. And then all of a sudden I start hearing like vocal warm-ups going on. And I'm like, what is that? And I like walk into like where the bathroom area, and I can hear through the wall, and I'm hearing like da 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 da. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's Lady Gaga. You know, she's, you know, doing some vocal warm-ups in the next room. I'm like, that's pretty cool. And then all of a sudden, you know, you hear on the other side, it's like, and we're like, wait, what? And like Metallica is in their dressing room, running through their set. And it was a surreal moment for sure, to be like surrounded by these like amazing like pop culture, you know, icons. But even more than that, what was really, I thought was really important to me, is that like, you know, Lady Gaga and Metallica and like artists of that caliber, like I think tend to be stereotyped in certain ways, that it's just, you know, it's just sort of like effortless, or it's just, you know, they just show up at the last minute to the gig, you know, and blah, blah, blah. But like the reality is, like the musicians that play at the highest level, whatever your genre is, they're there at 9 a.m. warming up, because they got to put on an awesome show, you know? And so like, there was also like that, being able to see that was actually really inspiring to me, to see all these artists of all these different genres that were there to celebrate music and celebrate how wonderful it is to be a musician, but also like really hardworking, you know? It's not effortless at all, no matter what type of music that you play. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's a really cool story. My next question was going to be sort of, how does getting a Grammy affect one's life and career? But then I thought someone asked a question on social media, asking who is your barber and who does your costumes, because you all look so fly all the time. And now I think the answer is all in that tent, when you got all that Fountain of Youth stuff that is only for the famous people, and now you get to just, you know, be rocking out all the time.
Yeah, we got to drink the elixir of life, and
There you go.
now our press photos are taken care of for the next few decades.
But I mean, how does getting a Grammy change one's life, or maybe your you know, ensemble's life?
My family thinks I actually have a real job now.
Yeah, my wife likes to say, my wife had like phrased it really well when we won. Like, the Grammy is legible to everybody. If you say, I play in one of the premier percussion quartets, if that's where we are in the, you know, in the country, in the world, whatever, people are like, what? But if you say, we won a Grammy, everyone and their grandmother and their auntie are all like, oh, okay, so you're a musician, you know? And I will say that, like, my favorite thing about the Grammys is something that one of the other guys alluded to. It really is all these different genres of music coming together, and a community of musicians, working musicians, you know, through a voting process, but, you know, supporting each other and recognizing the achievements of one another. Maybe my least favorite thing is just with awards in general, there's this feeling of like, you know, win or lose, this sort of like athletic competition vibe of it, which I never attracted me. And one of the reasons I like being a musician is because I don't think you can win or lose as a musician. I think you can give a better or worse performance based on your own standards or your audience's standards. But you know, the competition aspect, that's a little tricky. But I will say that when we were standing on stage and we had won, and Rob was speaking and accepting the award and thanking people, I remember looking at the other guys and like very vividly remembering when we were students, when we were like, you know, loading marimbas into our sedans for our very first gig, you know, driving through snowstorms on Valentine's Day, just like these horrible things that we've done to like be a percussion group, a professional group. And it did, at least for me personally, provide a perspective and a moment of reflection to say, wow, we worked really hard and I'm just going to enjoy this.
Conversely, now when it still happens, when we're driving through snowstorms on Valentine's Day and loading a marimba onto an elementary school stage, which still happens, it is pretty nice to have a memory like, you know what, we've reached an amount of acceptance and support that we get to have a little badge of honor, which is nice. It's something that we can just have as a memory and help us keep going.
Maybe my favorite thing about the entire experience was like right after it happened and through the next morning, through the next week, like just phone and email and Facebook messages, everything's like blowing up with all of the like other percussionists and other musicians who were like reaching out to like say congrats and to say how happy they were for us and how proud they were and all these things. And it's like to like realize that you are part of this really wonderful community of people, and it feels like, especially for percussionists, I think felt like a win for all of us on some level. That like, cool, like especially when we were getting started, I remember looking at like chamber music competitions, and it's like percussion ensembles weren't eligible either, like explicitly or like just kind of by matter of how long it would take us to set up or whatever, and to like be like, well, this is from a pretty broadly viewed perspective of like a award for for music in this category, like a percussion ensemble has won this, and like we are part of this, and that felt like a big moment. It felt like a nice thing. And I think as sort of Dave was alluding to, the thing about music in contrast to like sports or something is that like it's it's not about the winning and losing, it's about like the thing you create that you share with other people, and I think the one of the awesome things about winning a Grammy and about being nominated even is that it has then opened up more doors for us to create and share more things with more people. And I think because of the legibility of the Grammy, I think it's helped to get us in front of different audiences. It's helped us to get other kinds of collaborators, even just more open and more interested to exploring what kind of collaborations we could do together and what could come out of it. And then that reaches, different people than we would if just as a percussion quartet in our world. So that's kind of the dividends, I think, in the big picture. And because all the things we're doing are sort of planned over a long time and take time to develop. It wasn't like, the day after the Grammys in 2017, all of a sudden our life was different, but it was like, the calls we were making in March of 2017 were getting answered a little bit more, and that led to more projects that then got developed in 2018 and premiered in 2019, et cetera. And so like it's just gradually kind of added heat to the fire as things keep moving forward. And you can't necessarily draw a line of like, here's what would have happened if we hadn't won the Grammy, and here's what happened because we did, but it all sort of just contributes to the momentum.
I will agree that I definitely felt an investment in that victory being for all of us. So I'm sorry, or you're welcome, but you're sharing this victory and this Grammy with, I think, 5,000 to 10,000 percussionists all over the world. So I really feel like it was a huge thing for the art form. So that's amazing. And looking at your body of work, which is so impressive, 13 albums, 11 that you were featured on, and then you've done everything from concerti to playing on elementary school stages to composing to teaching to outreach. You published an album last year, you're publishing an album this year, and these are all huge. How do you curate all of this stuff? Obviously, I think Google Docs are the app for all of us to have on our phones, but how do you do this much creative work, and how much of it is now informed through market research? That was my other question, is how much of it is you listening to what sort of the zeitgeist is and responding to that, and how much of it is just like, I've always wanted to do this, let's do this?
Those are really good questions. I think that the way we do so many things is actually very, very natural. Going back to a question you asked a while ago, what did we envision our lives like once we became a full-time percussion ensemble? I remember conversations that we had, which seem hilarious now, because we were like, well, once we're a full-time percussion ensemble, I'm gonna like spend 3 hours a day practicing, this instrument that I've always wanted to play or something like that. And the reality is that our days fill up quickly. And I think that the reason that they do is because each of the four of us have an appetite for a lot of music and a lot of projects. And we are actually, I think still, I think this is true, still like reining ourselves in a lot. There's things that we want to do, and we sort of have to say, well, I think now is maybe not the time, because we already said we do this, and this. The number of projects is just an outgrowth, I think, of who we are.
I also think we have an amazing staff, and we have a pretty well-defined at this point division of labor. So it's not like Peter has to think about the lighting for every single concert that we do, and I don't have to think about how, like, the check from every single concert, and Rob doesn't have to think about, fill in the blank. We have roles that have grown naturally through the growth of the organization, and sometimes very deliberately have created roles to divide up all the work. And then have gotten really lucky, but have been intentional too with our hiring, and have purposely welcomed onto the team amazing, passionate, reliable, hardworking people who we could trust with anything. So there's 4 full-time ensemble members, but there's also 3 full-time staff members who have really, really, really helped our capacity. And without, I specifically remember when we first hired the first employee that wasn't an ensemble member, Liz Pesnell, and she was just a part-time hire. And immediately our lives just instantly became better. Because it's like, oh my gosh, we're playing a concert and someone answered an email about something. What? So it's, it's pretty amazing. Just like even that, the fact that the ensemble can be doing something, but the organization can be focused on something else too. We're really lucky, but it took a long time to build up, and we were intentional about it. But that's I think really does add to our capacity at this point, and our ability to do different projects.
Yeah, and then we are we're not unique, but we are the way that we are organized, and the way that we have been organized now since 2013 is like this is our only job. The Third Coast Percussion is my full-time job, and it is the full-time job of Dave and Sean and Rob, and it doesn't allow for us to do anything else. If that makes, I can't take another job. I can't also be like a part-time teacher at a university, or also take this other gig. It's like this is all we do. And when we made that decision to go all in, and we went all in, and we still maintain today. I mean, like we have like regular hours, like everybody works the same amount of time every day. It's like a 9-to-5 job, Monday through Friday in a normal week, so it's like this is our full-time job. And when we made that commitment, the capacity just exploded. It was so different, because now, rather than the 4 of us focusing on Third Coast, but also doing those other jobs that we were doing, it's like, no, we're focusing exclusively on Third Coast Percussion. And yeah, I mean, just the capacity exploded. And then when we started hiring staff with the same expectations that like, this is your full-time job. So like you have regular full-time like hours, and so like you are doing this exclusively for us. That also just, our capacity exploded. And we've always looked at just different areas of like the music industry, and trying to figure out what is the better decision to either contract something out or just hire an employee to do it full time for us. This gets into like a larger like conversation about certain things that we have that our employees like do. But yeah, there are other organizations, musical organizations, where like the performing members are not full time. Like they don't have full time hours. There are other performing organizations where the performers are not involved in any of the administrative stuff. But that's what we are, and so we have this very sort of holistic approach to Third Coast percussion that I think for us has served us really well. We're not unique. There are a handful of other groups like this, but I would say it's more unique in the classical world, that how we're sort of set up.
I was intrigued by the part of your question that touched upon how we choose our different artistic projects, and Rob looks like he's anxious and I'll to talk about it, and he probably has a lot of thoughts too. So I'll just say it's really case by case. I would say sometimes an awesome, amazing, inspiring collaborator comes to us and says, "Hey, would you ever want to do this with us?" And we say, "Oh, it's so cool that you even know who we are." Yes, of course, we'd love to work with you. Sometimes it's a planned, set aside artistic planning meeting where we sit down and we're like, we have a limited amount of capacity. Who are the music creators that we really want to reach out to, who aren't in our network right now, who maybe aren't writing for percussion, that we want to make sure become part of our world? And then there's a spectrum in between.
Yeah, totally. I was just gonna talk about that same question. I think it's a very interesting question. I wouldn't say we do any sort of like formal market research where we're trying to figure out like what's going to be the next trend in percussion ensemble music or something. I don't know, but I think we're all pretty attuned to just like what's going on out there generally, and like listening to a lot of different music and checking out a lot of different artists, and I think being very open-minded about like what the possibilities are. And then I think there's a little bit of like a process that happens. I think partially just from doing this for the years that we have, I think we've gained a little bit of maybe an intuitive understanding of like, okay, if we do this, that'll be a really cool project. And I think here's how that would go in terms of touring or recording or whatever. But if we do this project, I think that would be really interesting and cool, and it'll be good for this, but we're probably not gonna be able to tour that, or whatever. And sometimes it comes down to specifics, but sometimes it's understanding the landscape more broadly, because we don't exist in a vacuum. Even just aside from like, it's not just us and an audience, but so much of what we do is happening because there are concert presenters, people who run festivals and series and all these things, who are excited about the things we're offering and want to bring us in. And so we're starting with like, here's the projects we want to do, here's the things we're excited about, but even if we're like super duper sold on something and no one wants to present it, then basically we will maybe do it one time in Chicago, and then like it might not happen again. And I think some of the different projects we do maybe also have multiple different purposes or goals, or at least just like maybe have different goals between the projects. And sometimes there's certain things that are like the projects we do where it's about the collaborative process. Maybe there's an educational aspect to working with a composer who's earlier in their career. And like, yeah, if we get a piece that we can like tour everywhere, that's great. But like, it's about like giving this person the opportunity to explore their voice on percussion instruments. And even if we do the piece one time, it's an awesome collaboration, and that artist comes away with like some different perspectives about it, that's like a success. Whereas if we like invest all of our organizational like marketing and fundraising and everything to commission composer X for a big piece, and we can only play it one time, like that's not great for our organization. And so I think, and there's sort of a constant feedback process where we're maybe even talking to presenters a few years out about something. And if no one's getting excited about it, we may sort of modify course a little bit as we're going. But I think, we're between the four of us, we're genuinely passionate about a lot of different possibilities. And I think we try to always start from there. And if one of the four of us or two of the four of us are super excited about a project or someone we can work with, then like, cool, let's go with that and see where it can take us. And then we sort of see how it proceeds from there.
I'll just point out a very specific example because it's like staring at me. I remember my background here. There was an anniversary recently, a few years back, of the birth of Lou Harrison. And we had conceived of a program that we thought that we loved, music that was in our repertoire, that we paired With Lou Harrison, we also got possibilities of commissioning based on some similar setups. At the same time, someone brought the idea to us of co-composing, or somehow making a movie film score to a children's film called Paddle to the Sea, which we had never heard of at all. But we watched it and we were like, actually, this would be totally worth our time and it would be inspiring. And so we created these two programs, which we were equally artistically, like, we would put on any stage if anyone gave the opportunity to. And we got to do the Harrison concert, I think maybe once or twice, just because of the people that we had been talking to at the time were really intrigued by this concert of a show that dealt with issues of water rights and music that all was born out of these specific influences. And there's a lot of things for our Paddle to the Sea program. So instead of making an album of our concert of the Lou Harrison project, we were like, organizationally, it makes a lot more sense for us to make an album of Paddle to the Sea.
It really is so invigorating to hear you speak, because there is something that there's a way in which people describe your quartet, those who know you more intimately than I do, and everybody just says that you are really solid, awesome, honest people. And that's exactly what I am getting now, as I'm learning through this podcast platform about all these ways in which I should do this, and I hope our listeners are too. And so in many ways, you have achieved several of my dreams. So besides, playing in front of Beyonce, Jesus, I mean, that was supposed to be me. I was supposed to be the first marimbist that she hears, but like, okay, I'll forgive you. The second one is Danny Elfman. I mean, Danny Elfman was the first person I remember. I was in high school, and that was the first time that I became really interested in modulations, because I heard his music with Tim Burton. I just loved every Tim Burton film, and I would hear them and be like, ooh, I now like harmony. What is this? How'd you get to work with him? Does he talk about hands all the time? Have you seen his collection of hands? And like, how was that? That's so incredible.
Yeah, he's I'll just say a couple of things. There's a lot of stuff we could talk about with that project, but I think one of the really interesting things about working with him was actually the when we first met him, we had an opportunity. We were on tour. We were in LA, and this was right when like the commissioning process was just beginning with him, and so we were just we would never talked to each other before, so the stars aligned, and he was in LA and we were in LA, and so we got together after this concert this one night, and then realized just from talking to him, that he's actually a percussionist, a trained percussionist, has this whole history of percussion. I mean, he like used to build marimbas himself, like by hand, and like, it's all these like crazy like stories. And so that was just sort of like really inspiring. And like, we were geeking out on like, really obscure instruments. He's like, oh yeah, I have like a metal Deane Anklang from, I mean, like it was just all this like crazy stuff. So I think that's, to me, that was like a really sort of inspiring moment. We're realizing that like, this is this person that has created all these iconic like film scores and whatnot, but he's also just like a drummer and a percussionist, and just really passionate about it too. So to talk to him and see how excited he was to have the opportunity to write for an ensemble for ours was pretty cool.
Yeah, at that same meeting, I just remember him talking about his incredible passion for classical music, which of course you hear in his film scores, but he is, I mean, I don't want to speak for him, but the way he sounds when he talks, he's as excited about writing classical music right now as he is about writing film scores and rock music. And the other thing that I have loved about working with him that has felt like another sort of like reinforcement of some things that Peter was talking about when we were at the Grammys. Danny is super professional and has extremely high expectations. When we were premiering the piece, a lot of times we rehearse a ton, just like so much, and we have really high standards for ourselves. And so we're kind of accustomed to showing up and playing a composer's music for them for the first time and having them say, and I'm not bragging on us or anything, but a lot of times people say, wow, that sounds really great. I don't have any comments. But Danny had lots of comments, lots and lots of comments. And it wasn't a thing of like, you guys aren't doing this right. It was just a lot of like, he had a very specific idea in his head about just about every single moment of his piece. And he was not a jerk about it at all. He was awesome. But and then that was for the premiere, and then he produced the recording that we're putting out in a couple months. Same deal. Every aspect. It was never. He knew when he had an opinion, and he knew exactly what that opinion was at every single moment. And it was just a cool lesson for us, like a reinforcement of a lesson that we've had many times over the course of our careers.
Yeah, he has such a singular. I mean, his voice is it's so particular. It is like Danny Elfman. You hear the piece that he wrote for us. You hear any of the music he writes, you're like, oh yeah, that's Danny Elfman. And it's like this. It's a super specific aesthetic that he has created for himself, over the course of his career. But yeah, it's interesting him even hearing his stories of working with other ensembles, and he talks a lot. I remember him talking a lot about just like, no, the rhythm just needs to be he has this sort of insistence to his music, and he's like, sometimes players, like, they'll look at it and be like, oh well, maybe I can go he's like, no, I just want it needs to be insistent, and he's really confident with that voice that he's created for himself, and I think we all found that very, very inspiring. Because it was an honor to play a new piece by him that is very much like his voice.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was like so kind of in awe of him throughout the process. I mean, I think like despite what an incredibly big name he is, like he was throughout the process of writing this piece, he was like asking a lot of questions. He wanted like samples of all these different instruments. He was going to try out like, okay, well, what about this metal thing? What does that sound like? And like we'd send him all these different things so that he could. He was really getting in the weeds with all the details and finding like that here's exactly what I want this to sound like. And also like hearing him talk about sort of the trajectory of his career. He's done a whole. I mean, everyone knows his film scores obviously, but like Oingo Boingo, and then like. The concert music he's writing now and all these different things, and sort of at each stage of the process, like him basically being willing to be like, oh, I have an opportunity to like move into this world. I want to move into this world. I'm going to go get it. and like getting pushback from people who are like, well, do you really know what you're doing? He's like, this is what it is. This is what it's supposed to be. And like coming in with that attitude of like, I do know what I'm doing. Even if like on some level he was like, oh gosh, do I know what I'm doing? But I think artistically, he really knew what he was doing, and he's always known like what that sound is in his head, and he's put in the work at every step of the way to like really flesh out exactly what it is that he's trying to do. And I think it still is just like so focused on the craft of making music, which is like so awesome to see for someone who's at that level. And he seems like, in the big picture, really organized in terms of like, okay, well, I can do this many film scores a year, and then to make room for concert music, maybe I'm doing one less of these projects so that I have time to do this, because it all takes up so much time. And he's like doing it at such a high level, and like was just like so cool to work with in the process too. Like the first meeting, I hope I'm remembering, but that first meeting we had with him, where he like came and met us during the intermission of a concert we were doing in LA, and I think he'd like just gotten off a plane from like London. And he like came to our show to meet with these 4 percussionists that he'd never met before, and who like were really lucky to have him write us a piece, and like hung out with us and talked about all this stuff. It was like he's interested in all the things that you'd want a collaborator to be interested in.
At the end of the meeting, he's like, it was awesome hanging with you guys. I got to go home. I got to work on Dumbo, the soundtrack to Dumbo. And I was like, wait a second. I was just in the movie theater and I saw an advertisement for Dumbo. Isn't that coming out in like 6 weeks or something? He was like, yeah.
Yeah, he's super prolific. And he wrote the piece for us, this big, giant 4-movement piece, in like a couple months while he was finishing the score to Dumbo and like all these other, things. I don't know how. I don't know how he does it all. It's
he also, when he sent us he sent us, I think, some like early mock-ups. And the pieces in 4 movements, but the mock-ups were really telling. They were numbered like 3, 7, 11, Yeah,
so it's like there's probably like 5 or 6 other movements out there, like sketches of movements.
Totally. He like tried a bunch of ideas. This is another thing that we've heard some certain creatives say. I remember Ed Sheeran. This is not someone we've worked with. However, we went to this thing where Ed Sheeran, because of a recording academy thing, basically like played a little and talked about his music. And I remember him, and regardless of what you think about Ed Sheeran, he's incredibly successful and like an amazing pop songwriter. And I remember him talking about like he writes like 30 or 40 songs for an album, knowing that it's going to be a 10-song album. And he basically throws away 30 songs that for any other artist would be their biggest hit ever. Do you know what I mean? Because he's just like, he's like, it has to be this level. And I remember seeing Danny's, just thinking about, wow, all the ideas that he's thrown away. Like, or maybe he doesn't. Maybe throwing away isn't the right way. Maybe he finds a different place for it or something like that. But there's something really inspiring about that too. That just sort of the way that really creative people have to create all the time. Augusta Reed Thomas is like this as well. She's another composer we've worked with a ton. She wrote us the first piece she wrote for us. She's written us like a half dozen now. But the first piece she wrote for us, she kept writing and writing and rewriting. And she would come in with 10 minutes of music and throw away 8 minutes of the music after hearing us play it. And we were like, this sounds great. Not good enough. She would go back and edit and find the moments that were better than the other moments, keep those, and then, it was really inspiring.
I did want to just really briefly explain how we got connected with Danny Elfman. Because it goes back to a lot of things that we have been talking about in other contexts too, like an intentional, big organizational plan that yielded some cool, unexpected results. So we had, for a long time, been trying to commission a work from Phil Glass. And it took several years, honestly, just even to get in touch in like a meaningful way. And it included us arranging some of his music that we thought would work really well on percussion instruments, and then showing that to him and creating a work and having him write us a really big piece and making an album of it, touring it a bunch. And through like a really intentional plan and making sure that it was at the highest possible level that we could perform it, Philip was at the premiere. And he was like, wow, that went really well. He's like, you guys, I like you guys. He's like, would you want to come play on my festival? We're like, yeah, we definitely want to play on your festival. That sounds fantastic. He's like, okay, my people will reach out to you. And his people did reach out to us about playing on this festival. And they let us know that he would like to commission another piece for our ensemble. From a friend of his, and his friend happened to be Danny Elfman.
Oh my God.
So that was like amazing. In some ways we lucked into it, sort of. But we wouldn't have been in that position unless we had honestly done a lot of work and planned for a really long time, and been, able to say, okay, yes, we have the capacity to get a piece from Danny Elfman. Here's what we're going to do with it. Here's our plan for it. We're definitely going to record this piece. We're going to get it out into the world.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely were prepared, more than prepared, for this moment of opportunity to then just take advantage of it. But the next time you see him, just tell him that there's this young lady from Serbia whose life in music theory he changed by his beautiful music. So just tell him, one of the hosts from the greatest percussion podcast ever is his huge fan. I think
he's got a new percussion concerto coming out that Colin Curry is going to play. So
I know.
Maybe there's exclusivity up on that. You should play that.
I have to give you a list of celebrity musicians who, if next time you have some sort of an agreement with them, just include me in the background. I'll be your triangle clip or something. Just please include me. Ed Sheeran included. But let's move on to what is going to happen in the near future for you all. First of all, the single that's going to come out sort of a few days around when this episode airs. Tell us about Derivative.
Yeah, Derivative is a piece written for us by JLIN, who's an incredible composer and music producer, who wrote us a set of 7 pieces. The set of pieces is called Perspective, and Derivative is one of those 7. And JLIN is an example of a composer who we very intentionally approached, because we came to know her music through, well, speaking for myself, I first learned about her through Pitchfork. I just saw a review. I just read Pitchfork reviews and listen to the music every now and then. And her music just totally captivated us, because it's electronic music. It comes from a sort of the side of like electronic dance music, but it's so percussion focused, and the rhythmic language is incredibly complex and like endlessly fascinating. So we very intentionally approached JLIN about a piece, and it took several years because of, to find a time in her schedule when she could write for us. And she, I think, is indicative of this goes back to another question you asked about sort of like, how Third Coast, what we do in the percussion marketplace, or I think the original question was, did we have an intention when we got started of what we would do that others weren't doing? And I think I would agree with, I think Rob answered that no, we didn't. But I think what we've come upon is, one of the things that we love is reimagining what it means to be a classical musician and how classical music is created. Because it can be, like any genre, very siloed. In the case of classical music, it's like if you studied at these institutions with these people and you write music in this way, then I dub the classical music and, go forth and play concerts. But to us, classical is just a word. And what is interesting to us is quite hard to define in words. But we are drawn to different musicians for different reasons. And if they create music by writing a notation on Sibelius or Finale or by hand, awesome. But if they create music in a digital audio workstation, a DAW, sort of software-based creation, great. If they create music that's primarily improvisational, great. We've worked with a lot of different music creators. JLIN wrote for us music entirely in her digital audio workstation. She sent us a mix down and the stems, and we set her music, her sounds and her rhythms on our instruments. And it's one of my favorite creative processes we've ever gone through, because we got to have a creative voice in deciding some really specific things that I'll be a little crass and say most composers make some sort of decision that is frustrating for percussionists on some level. They say, yes, that has to be on a, I don't know.
Rototom.
A rototom. God help us. Yeah. It's like you really have to play it on rototoms. And it's like, friend, you don't want to hear anything on a rototom. But with JLIN, she was just like, here's the music. And we play her music, make no mistake about it, but we set it on the instruments. And so there's an aspect of it that feels good and sounds idiomatic that I think is special and cool as well.
Yeah, and something I particularly loved about this process too, and the way it worked, is like that everything just Dave described is like how it got done, but we also just had time during that process to like hang out with JLIN and like listen to music together, listen to things that she was working on, talk about things she was excited about, improvise a little bit, like explore sounds, pull things off the shelf and be like, whatever. And then, so I think we got to really understand both that way, just like through the personal interaction, and also by like having the stems of all of the different voices in her music. Like, how does it work? What's interesting to her as an artist? Like, why does she write music in the way that she does? And like, what is unique about her voice? And like, how do we find our way into that as we're figuring out the way to like orchestrate this on our instruments and figure out how to do it live with 4 of us and whatever. And she talks about her music, as she describes it as CPU is her mantra, that she wants her music to be clean, precise, and unpredictable. And so like, I think if you have a mix down some stems and those 3 words, you're like, cool, I think I have some idea what to do. It's a very time-consuming process to like go through and figure all that stuff out. And we definitely, in each of these tracks, each of the sort of pieces within her set, Like some of them, like one of us came in with a concept for like, cool, let's orchestrate it this way and use this instrument and that instrument, and you do this, and we'll combine these two into a setup and whatever. And it was like, that works pretty well, cool. And, adjustments were made over time. And then there were one or two movements, especially I know for the two that I was sort of like, was the initial shepherd for like figuring out how to orchestrate, or at least like where to start. We like tried a couple things. I was like, nah, that's not going to work. That doesn't sound good. And we had to sort of like go back to the drawing board and try something else. Yeah, I don't know. It's like an incredible learning process. It's something that I think like helps us grow as artists too, and definitely taught me a lot of things in the process of doing this in a different way than just maybe a more traditional commissioning process would.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we all really like getting our hands dirty in the creative process of like the music. And then, especially over the past couple of years, we've also just grown really fond of composing music for each other, or for our ensemble to play, or arranging music, and so now some of our current and even future musical collaborations are more of this model that we've been describing that we had with JLIN, where it's highly collaborative, so it's very far away from the classical model of contacting a composer to write you a piece and then 6 months later you get a score and parts, in the mail. We generally just don't do that at all anymore. Yeah.
You're now nominated for 3 Grammys, including as composers, which is incredible. Can you tell us about Archetypes and how that process is different? And how are you now going to approach the Grammys? You're going to bring a bigger duffel bag when you go? Because you know what's up.
I'll talk a bit about Archetypes, which is our most recent album. The new one that comes out has JLIN's music and Danny Elfman's music, and another cool project with Flutronics, another arrangement of Philip Glass's work. But the previous album was Archetypes, which was created in collaboration with Clarice Assad and Sergio Assad, two other actually Chicago-based musicians, originally from Brazil. And that's a great example of a project that they approached us. Sergio and Clarice actually came to us after a concert in Chicago with an idea of doing a project with us. And perfect example of what Sean was describing, like, oh my gosh, you know who we are? Yeah, we would love to work with you. And it was building on this idea of what we're talking about, finding new ways of creating classical music, because initially the idea was that Sergio and Clarice would write 6 pieces each to be a part of this set of 12 pieces, each inspired by one of the Jungian Carl Jung's archetypes. And then as soon as we got started, the 4 of us said, we'd really like to write some music too. This is something that we're doing more and more of. And we asked if they'd be okay with it, and they were. And so not only did each of the 4 of us write one of the archetypes, we also had this wonderful collaborative experience working with Sergio and Clarice, where they wrote the pieces that they wrote. But sometimes the percussion parts were fully fleshed out, and sometimes they were sketches. And at all points, they gave us a ton of latitude to say, what about this voicing instead? Or what about this instrument that you've probably never heard of, because I wouldn't have heard of it if I wasn't a percussionist. And by the same token, for all of us, I think the first time we'd ever written for classical guitar, we were writing for Sergio Assad, like no pressure whatsoever. So we all like sheepishly handed the music to them at the first rehearsal, and we're like, please just make it sound good. Change everything, change all of it if you want to. And same with Clarice, and so they were just incredibly gracious. And it created, like all of these projects that we're talking about, it created music that absolutely couldn't have been created another way. We could have decided that it was, the 4 of us write our pieces, the 2 of them write their pieces, and then we don't talk about it. We just show up and play and do our best. And it would not have been as good of an album, I think.
So what about the Grammys, and what do you expect of that experience, or how do you feel about it now that you're a little bit better equipped?
It's going to be a blast no matter what happens. It is just an honor to be there. I think we talked about this a little bit earlier in the conversation, but like just being there at the Grammys is just a really inspiring experience because you're surrounded by all these other amazing musicians and a variety of different genres. And like, but everything is just like just sort of like a celebration. It's less about like ego or competitive or whatnot. It's really just like a bunch of musicians getting together and celebrating the fact that we're all able to make music, right now. And it'll be especially exciting this time around because we actually do get to do it in person again. Like the last year's Grammy, was all virtual. So I think we're all just really, really excited about that. It's crazy though, like it always is. Like, we're in the middle of our touring season. So we'll be doing a show in New York at BAM the night before, and then the next morning getting up and taking a 5 a.m. flight out to Las Vegas to go to the Grammys. And but that's great. That's part of it. It's part of being a musician.
It's in Vegas this year, so all bets are off. Anything could happen, I'm excited. I'm excited to go to the Grammys with Sergio and Clarice there too, because it's just like it's a cool energy being around them, and it's sort of just like expanding the sort of family of folks that we get to like have the celebration together with. It's gonna be super fun.
I'm particularly excited this year because there's so much percussion represented in the nominees. It feels like a really cool special year. Like I think I would have been flabbergasted 10 years ago to see like a full-length album of Andy Akio's percussion music nominated. Like that in itself is freaking amazing. And then there's like a mixed instrumentation thing with Clarice and Sergio that we're doing, and in different categories there's like amazing composers who have really pushed boundaries, that have written for us or written for some of our friends, and just it's cool to see so much percussion represented this year.
It really is. It really is. And best of luck, and have all the fun. And if you need a bigger bag so you could send some to us, we'll ship you. We'll ship you some. Awesome. So before we wrap up, and thank you so much for staying for so long. We're definitely, this is a double episode.
Double episode.
We're very, very
blast.
grateful. Yeah. Before we wrap up, there are some Instagram questions that we want to ask, and feel free to do these as quickly as you like. The first question is from @Linoselias, who says, I assume we've already addressed this, but how do you run your organization? Are all four of you leading the group? And has this changed at all over the years? You've mentioned that you have your roles and that those have evolved, but has there been anything also worth mentioning? Oh, sorry, second language.
We're all, go ahead, Dave.
I was just going to say, the four of us have lead administrative roles in the group, and we always have. And the exact things that we do on a day-to-day basis can shift a little bit, but our main roles have stayed the same for almost 10 years or more. The main shifts that happen for us at this point are when we hire new people, we when we can, we offload some responsibilities to them. More often than not, it just creates new opportunities, and so there's more work that gets done.
Yeah, and their roles have grown too as they've like taken on more and more responsibility and new demands and everything.
That person can check out our, as Dave mentioned, TCP FAQ series on YouTube. And if you like this podcast, please subscribe to us on YouTube, because we're putting out new music, but also new behind the scenes stuff all the time.
Yeah, we'll include all of that in the show notes, so people will be able to find you everywhere. And then a little philosophical question from @Acorn Museum. Why do you play?
It's a crazy question, and we could be very verbose about this. I think, I don't even know if this is an answer, but I do know that like music, I've known for a long time that music was going to be my life's career, if you had told me 20 years ago that I was going to be playing in a full-time percussion ensemble as my career, I'd be like, what? I wouldn't have believed you. Not because I don't like it, but because, that just, I didn't even think that was an option. But, I think if I wasn't playing in a percussion ensemble, I'd be doing something else musically. And that's all I can say.
Yeah, I think like music, the experience of playing and listening to music, or experiencing any art, I think, but like it's a very intense, visceral, time-based experience, temporal experience when it's music. It's like it is the moment of like what I think we're all seeking in life. Like it's not like a means to another end. Like so many things we do in life are so that we can have blah, 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 blah. And then, but like the experience of playing music, the experience of hearing music or experiencing other art in that moment is like it's the joy. It is the joy, I guess. There you go. That's it.
That was really wonderful. Yeah, it's not a transactional thing. It really is just the love of it. Okay, and the most serious question of all, which again, I've mentioned a little bit before, but I don't know how serious this person is, so we always pay respect to all of our listeners. This is and I'm sorry for butchering this, I don't know, Billefouilly, for example. It sounds a little bit French to me. It's not, I just don't know how to read your Instagram handle, dear person, but who is the TCP Barber and who does the costuming? Because you boys are always too fresh. So is there some conversation to be had about your visual identity then?
If 20-year-old me could hear that question, he would not, never possibly believe. I don't know if I still believe, but we, for our, for all of the photo shoots we've done in recent years, and also to sort of like find great clothes for us to wear in concert, we've worked with a stylist that we've been connected to through a really amazing photographer that we've worked with, and that has helped us sort of steer our look, either like, here's some specific clothes that we can try based on what you all seem to be into, and then also sort of maybe just like setting some sort of guidelines for like, cool, here's like generally what we're going for when we're playing concerts. But I think I think we've wound up in a pretty good place given where we started, what we started with, what we're working with.
We needed help, so we got help.
None of us are very fashionable people, but we all have strong opinions. So we've learned over the years to have somebody who is very, very fashionable give us advice.
Smart. Well, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation, really, all of you. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you and to learn more about how everything goes on the inside of TCP, and it's really been great. And we wish you the best of luck with the new releases, with the Grammys. Have fun there with our sandbox buddies as well. We all wish we could be there, but we're all there with you in spirit. And we can't wait to hear more of your music come out.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for the great conversation.
Thanks for having us.
Of course, we're so happy to have you. Thank you everybody for listening, and we will catch you on episode 322.